Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Satgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Right? We will say the invocation. I'll share it with you. Antaryascha bahirvidhutatimiram Jyotirmayam shashvatam Sthanam prapya virajate venamatam Ajnanamunmulayan Pashyan vishwamapidamullasatiyo Vishvasya pare paraha Tasmai Shri Ramanaya Loka Gurave Shokasya Hantre Namaha. All right, we will read the verses that we have covered. Okay, so if you can, please keep your video on so I can see you. I can make sure you're understanding well. Okay, right. From verse number 1. You all know the tune now? Yes, everybody has a book? Okay. Karturajnaya prapyate phalam karma kim param karma tajjadam kritimaho tadau patana karanam phalam shashvatam gati nirodhakam Ishwararpitam nechaya kritam chittashodhakam mukti sadhakam kaya vangmana karyamuttamam pujanam japash chintanam kramat jagata ishadi yukta sevanam ashtamurti bhret Deva Pujanam. We didn't do this verse yet, I know. Okay. So, last week we were in verse number 4. Verse number 5 we touched upon. We'll review a little bit of verse number 4, then we'll go straight to verse number 5. So, where are we in the book? So, that's very important to know the structure. So, the thought process is very clear. So the first 3 verses talked about karma yoga. And that I think everybody has gotten, everybody has absorbed. The next set of verses is about bhakti yoga. Okay, so verses 4 to 9. And in verse 4, it talked about how there's 3 types of sadhanas. We went over the importance of bhakti, of connecting to God. Then we went over the 3 types of sadhanas. Puja, japa and chintanam or dhyanam. So it goes from grosses to such list. And last time we discussed puja. What is puja? Why we do puja? How we do puja? We talked about doing Shodashopachara puja, 16 steps, or even if we can do 5 steps, that's okay. We talked about when we pray to God, what do we ask for? We pray to God to ask for God.
right? We don't pray to God to ask for anything else. Don't use God for something else. We pray to God to ask for God. And we said that puja is a way, just as we invite a guest home, it's like bringing God in front of you, because we need to concretize. Our minds somehow have that need to concretize something. If we say Atman is uh, very, very subtle and it's unbreakable, then somebody will ask, like what? So then you'll have to say, like space. If we say Atman is very, it illumines the whole world, like what? Like the sun. We have this tendency in our minds to concretize, to grossify, so that we can comprehend, because otherwise it becomes difficult. So when we have a murti or a vigraha in front of us, it becomes a little bit easier to connect. And that is what we talked about as puja. Now, what is the highest form of puja? So that we see now in verse 5. So in verse number 5, it says, Jagata Isha Dhi Yukta Sevana. Okay, so first look at this word, Dhi Yukta. Okay, Dhi means intellect, Yukta means endowed with. So look at this Jagat. Jagat means world. So you look at this world, Dhi Yukta, with that intellect endowed with what? Isha, with God. So look at this world with your intellect thinking about God, but what about God? Sevanam, the service of God. So service of the world is service of God. And this is what's written very beautifully in our Chinmay Mission pledge, right? So, Jagata Ishadhi Yukta Sevanam. And who is this God? Ashtamurti Bhrit, the one who has eightfold forms. Ashtamurti Bhrit Deva Pujanam. So, serving the world with the attitude of serving God is the true worship of God. And who is that God? The wielder of the 8 forms. So, Bhrit means wielder. Murti means forms. Ashta means these 8 forms. What are these 8 forms? The 5 elements. So we know space, air, fire, water, earth, the sun, the moon, and the jiva. But what does this really mean? So first let us see. Puja, how do I know when I am done with puja? This Panchopachara puja, Shorashopachara puja. How do I know when I have reached the culmination of puja? Or how do I know when I'm ready to move on from puja? When I see the whole world as God, then I can move away from my puja. Because that is the highest state of puja, when I'm able to see the whole world as God. Now, why should I see the world as God? Very simply, because God is the world. That very word Jagat tells you Ja Jayate, it's born. Ga Gachati, it goes. Ta Tishtati, it stays. But it comes from, it goes into, and it stays in what? In God. So the worship the world as God, because God is the world. The world comes from God. The world originates from God. The world stays in God. The world goes into God. What do you mean? So we saw everything that's created has to have a creator, right? When you create a phone, that phone has to have a creator. When you create a project or a book, you write a book, that has to have a writer. When you make a meal, that has to have a chef, it has to have a cook. So everything that's created or made has to have a creator. Now, if you look at this entire world, which is so diverse, which is so infinite, that's not something you and I can create. That's not something you and I can make. And therefore, this entire world has to have a creator. It has to have a creator. And the world being so infinite, that creator is also infinite. The world being so powerful, there's so much order, there's so much structure. It's a beautiful system. That creator also has to have that. The world being filled with knowledge, the creator also has to have that. So because there is this whole created world, there is a creator. And because the world came from the creator, the world is nothing but the creator, isn't it? The world depends on the creator, so the world is nothing but the creator. So the first thing is, the whole world is actually God. It actually is God. Now the second point is, what does this feel like? What does it feel like to see God as this world? Now, in our Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, it's very, very beautifully put. Imagine that there's no time and there's no space, and we're all crunched up together. We're all crunched up together. There's no such thing as space. There's no such thing as time. Imagine the whole world together like that. That's what it's like to see the whole world as God. Actually, the things that are limiting us, the things that are dividing us, it's only time and space, isn't it? Imagine food outside. Your dinner is outside in your table, but after you eat, it becomes your body. Isn't it? Right? Or a mother, she has a fetus in her womb and it's her body, but right after it comes out, it's a baby. Yeah? So when only the space comes, when the time comes, then we feel like we're separate, but actually we are all one. And how to have this vision even further? What is the vision of your body? How is it that in your body everything feels one? Everything is one. If something happens to the eye, this hand will right away soothe it. If I bite my tongue, right away I'll get some water, or do something. If I hurt my leg, right away I'll massage it. The way that I feel like this body is so one, that this body, this entire thing is me, that way the whole world is like God's body. It's like God's body. And in our Upanishads, that's exactly what it says also. I will read to you from Mundaka Upanishad, and this is a kind of upasana. This is a kind of upasana that they tell the seekers to contemplate about, think about, that the whole world is actually God's body. I'll read it to you, then I'll explain what it says. Agnirmurdha chakshushi chandra suryau dishashrotre vagrvritascha vedaha vayuh prano hridayam vishvamasya padbhyam prithvi hyesha sarvabhutantaratma. Says Agnir Murdha means that head of this universal being is the heavens. And the eyes, Chakshushi, Chandra Suryo. One eye is the moon, one eye is the sun. And then it says Disha Shrotre. The ears are the directions, all the directions. And Bhag Vrivirtascha Veda. The speech are all the Veda mantras. Vayu prana. The prana of this universal being is all of the air, the entire Vayu. Hridayam Vishwam Asya. The whole world is the heart. Padbhyam Prithvi. The feet are the earth. Sarva Bhutantaratma. This is the self of all. So like this, in our Upanishads, in our Purusha Sukta, they always give this description of this being with thousands of heads and thousands of eyes and thousands of stomachs and arms. And it's just to make it further, or to drive it home further, that actually the whole world is God. It's God. Hmm? And if we can see the whole world as God's body, or even further, the whole world as our body, then what would that be like? Now, before we go to what would that be like, who is it that has this kind of vision? Hmm? Who is it that has this kind of vision? This kind of vision is what we call Jnana Chakshu. In chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says, Lord Krishna, I wish to see your universal form. I wish to see you in all splendor. And he says, you cannot see me with these fleshy eyes. What you need is called Divya Chakshu. It's called divine eye. What the divine eye really means, it's insight. You need that insight to see me. And so Lord Krishna gives him that Divya Chakshu. With that eye, Arjuna is able to see the whole world in Lord Krishna. And that whole chapter is just describing how the whole world is in Lord Krishna. The good, the bad, and even the ugly is in Lord Krishna. Now, here, when we look at this, how do we get that divine eye? When does that come? Actually, you and I have that divine eye. But we have it for different things. What is this Divya Chakshu or this divine eye? This divine eye is like this. For example, I will take Mahabharata. I will take Mahabharata because I can really relate to it. The first time, let's say you take a text, maybe you didn't really know, maybe you just heard about it. So there is some general kind of knowledge, very general knowledge. Yes, there's a text called Mahabharata. There's a text that's there, and it's about, that Kauravas, Pandavas, but also mostly about Lord Krishna. There's some general knowledge. Then after that, slowly, there's a little deeper understanding. It has 18 different chapters, and this is how the story flows, and this is, the whole family of the Kauravas, this is the Pandavas. So there's some general understanding. But then when you really dwell on it and you reflect on it and think about it, you get the beauty and the depth and the vision of the text. It's as though it comes alive for you. And that is no longer just a general knowledge or an understanding. That is what we call insight. We get an insight to something. And people have this insight in different things. Some people may have it in cooking, in certain how to make paratha. There's general knowledge how to make paratha. Yeah, you put it here, you put it there, finish. Then there's some kind of understanding. Okay, there's different atta that you can buy, and there's different ways. But some people have the real insight on how to make it, how to roll it, how to warm it, and how to what to eat it with so that it tastes absolutely divine. Some people have insight in that. Some people have insight in sports. Some this general knowledge. Okay, this is the game. Then understanding. This is really what the tactics are. These are the teams. Then some people have real insight as to how the whole thing works. So it's not that we don't have this divine eye or Divya Chakshu. We have it, but we have it for different things. But when we cultivate that divine eye to look in the world, we see God. Just like with the divine eye, when you look at paratha, you see freshness, flavor, you see just fulfillment. Or when you have a divine eye and you see sports, you see just a lot of color and you fun. Like that, when you see the world with this divine eye, you will see God. Now, what's really funny is that you and I have Divya Chakshu in many, many areas. Now, I'm sure after this, I will ask you, where is your Divya Chakshu? What is your area of Divya Chakshu? But the thing is, some of us in our profession, we have Divya Chakshu, isn't it? That profession, you have complete Divya Chakshu. Now, to get this Divya Chakshu, it took us so many hours, many hours to get that Divya Chakshu. So much hard work, so much investment of time. Imagine if I invested all that time in getting Divya Chakshu of God. Where would I be? Huh? Where would I be? I would have gotten moksha by now. So the funny thing is that we invest so much time in getting so much insight about the world, but we don't invest time in getting insight to what's beyond the world. This is the funniest thing. And so our insight develops, but it doesn't develop to the full capacity where we can really, really feel free, fulfilled. Hmm? This is called, so who sees it? The one who has Divya Chakshu. Now, what do they see? The ones who have Divya Chakshu, how do they see the world? When you see this world as God, how do you see the world? So here there are 4 A's, okay? How would you see the world? The first one is you see awe. A person who sees the world as God sees awe. It's awesome. How can we not be in awe of this body itself? Like how it has the capability to just take in food and then it just digests it and it pumps blood and nutrients to all different areas. It gets rid of what it doesn't need. It just works magic. We don't even know how it happens. It just works. Awe in how our bodies are made so perfectly, and 2 eyes and ears, and how come the ears didn't come in the mouth, and how come the mouth didn't come here. It is just like a perfect, like who could have thought of something like this? How do you think of something like this? Or how when you look at trees outside, how many different kinds of leaves there are. The other day I went for a walk, and there are so many different kinds of yellow leaves. I'm just so shocked at how many shades of this color there can be in a leaf. So there's so many shades of trees, there's so many shapes of the leaves. If you look at the body, you look at how the planets move, how the sun rises and sets. There is awe. How many people just take pictures about the sunrise and sunset and write so much poetry about it? So, one thing I will feel definitely is this is awe. And you will see this in the book of like Swami Tapovan Maharaj Ji, Ishwara Darshan. Like sometimes he would just be traveling, and he would just stop and look at a bird flutter its wings. And just hear that noise. That's just a wonder. And sometimes you and I also, when we are in the midst of nature, we just don't know what to say. We're just shocked, isn't it? So one is awe. The other thing that I would feel is a great sense of acceptance. Because as we saw in verse 1, God is that Kartu. Kartu, the, the overall doer, the overall giver of the results. The giver of the results, because you and I cannot control the results. And that universal intelligence, cosmic intelligence, with full knowledge, knows everything, all of our karmas, all of the jivas, all of the lives, and somehow we get whatever result we deserve to get in the time we deserve to get it, with whom, and in the right way. So there's this sense of acceptance at how beautifully life can be designed. Things that we could never even think of happen, isn't it? And sometimes we want it to be a certain way, but it turns out to be so much more beautiful than how we thought. Or sometimes we want it in a certain way, but it turns out to be so much more painful than we thought. But after some time, we realize that even that pain was a gain. So there's a sense of acceptance. There's a sense of, this is right. This is correct. Sthane, as Sthane Rishikesha, as he says in chapter 11. Also, there's a sense of awareness. There's a sense of awareness that all of us are interconnected. We are all connected to each other. We don't exist alone. We are all that same God. So what this really means is that every thought, every word, every deed has an effect. It has an impact. Every thought is a vibration. It's a vibration. So, when you think of somebody, somehow, sometimes that person will email, or that person will call, or that person will message. Why? Because that is a vibration. That's a vibration. That thought is a vibration. That's why we have to be careful. If we think negative about that person, it reaches that person. If we think positive about that person, it reaches that person. That thought, it moves very fast. So everything has an effect. Not only the thought has an effect, our words have so much power. Oh, how much one Twitter post in 20 seconds can reach millions of people, isn't it? Whether it's right or wrong, God knows, who knows, nobody knows. But the thing is that impact is there. We are also interconnected. Every single thing we do impacts somebody else. And even our actions. What we choose to do, what we choose not to do. So it makes us aware that I don't live alone. I'm not an individual being. I am interconnected with this whole world, and it's such a beautiful thing because we are one, and everything that I do affects everybody else around me. That's how one feels. What else? There's a sense of accommodativeness. We accommodate because there is God in everybody. Does that mean that everybody is godly? No, but there is God. The presence of God is in everyone, but the potentiality of God may not be manifest. Please see this. The presence of God is in everyone, but that divinity, that potentiality may not manifest, and it may not manifest not because of God, but because of that person's ego. The more that we shed that ego, the more that divinity in us is able to manifest. But the more that ego is there and strong and rampant, then that divinity will not manifest. So is there God in negative people too? Yes, God is very much there, but they don't know, maybe they're not aware of the presence of God, or they're unable to bring out the presence of God. Hence, we don't feel it there, but it is very much there. So it gives us a sense of accommodativeness that in that person too, there is God. It's almost like we see everybody as God in disguise. And if somebody is giving us a hard time or we're having tough times, then there's a lesson there to be learned. So the vision of a person, when you see this world as God, this is what happens. We feel in awe. We have a sense of acceptance. We have a sense of being accommodative. We have a sense of being aware. This is called Jagata Ishadi Yukta Sevanam Ashtamurti Brit Deva Pujanam. When I am able to see the whole world as God, then I have come to the highest level of puja. Then at that point, I don't need to do the puja that I would do at home. That itself is puja. So see the expansiveness of this. This is how far we have to reach. This is how pure the mind has to get to. And in fact, in Mandukya Upanishad, the first step is this. No, there's no entry. There's no entry for any individual. The first step is Virat. This is the first step. If you have not reached this step, do not even open that Upanishad. That is the kind of Upanishad it is. So that is Ashtamurti Brit.